Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives. Well, we finished our discussion on the Edge of Venomverse miniseries, and we finished looking at the Venomverse War Stories one-shot. I think it's time we get to the main event of this era. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to begin our discussion on Venomverse, which, is collected in this handy-dandy little trade, and as you can tell, this trade is a lot smaller than the Spider-Verse trade, which honestly, I'm kind of okay with. The other one was very bulky, and that contained all pretty much had the Spider-Verse trade not only had all the lead-in material, but also all the tie-ins. So I'm kind of glad this one's a lot smaller. And yeah, kind of going off of that, there are no tie-ins to Venomverse. Well, sort of, but I'll talk to that when I get to a later storyline. But my point is this: Venomverse is contained completely within this book. There are no tie-ins save for War Stories and Edge of Venomverse, which we've already looked at in the Edge of Venomverse trade. And so, likewise, what we have here is literally the core of Venomverse. It begins and ends with this miniseries, so it's not going to be as long. And yes, you heard me right, it's a miniseries. It's not a storyline told within the pages of a Venom comic. Everything that we have for Venomverse is contained here. However, is it worth your time? Was all the lead-in material worth it, or ultimately is this just a pale mockery of what Spider-Verse was? Well, let's take a look at it. Well, let's take a look and find out. And of course, to kick things off, today we'll be taking a look at Venomverse number 1. And today's issue actually begins in the main Marvel Universe, specifically with a supervillain known as Jack-O-Lantern. Now, I have not really seen that much about Jack-O-Lantern, but apparently he does have ties to the Venom symbiote. But basically, his whole shtick is that he's a guy that rides around on a mechanized broomstick with a pumpkin for a head. Okay, it's not actually his head, it's actually a helmet. There is a human face under there, but that pumpkin is basically why he calls himself Jack-O-Lantern. And like I said, he and Venom have a history. Well, okay, maybe not the main Venom that we know, but one of the previous hosts, but you get my gist. Basically, Venom knows Jack-O-Lantern, and currently Jack-O-Lantern is flying through New York City doing God knows what, while Venom is hunting him, and sure enough, Venom manages to catch Jack-O-Lantern in an alley, and after he smacks him into a building, he ends up holding him up, and while Jack-O-Lantern pleads for his life and says, "Hey, I give," Venom's like, "I know, like, you're a psychotic, you're a serial murderer, you don't deserve to be just taken in," and so he just holds Jack-O-Lantern up, and then just drops him to the ground below, and again, he's like this high up, so the fall really does severely hurt Jack-O-Lantern. He ends up face planting right there, and it ends up breaking up the helmet that you can see his face, and there's some significant damage there as he's actually lost a few teeth. Although Venom ends up upping the ante as he jumps down and slams right on Jack-O-Lantern, which actually hurts him even more. He's not dead, but he's not gonna be walking for a while. And basically, all the civilians that are looking at this are just kind of like horrified, like it's like a supervillain turf war. Should we call the police or something? But Venom really is just like, he doesn't really give a shit. And while people are asking, "Hey, did you kill him?" He's like, "No, he's not dead. Not that he deserves to walk away." And basically, while everyone's just like horrified and wondering, "Well, hey, why did you do that?" Venom's of course trying to defend himself, but saying, "Well, he's a serial murderer." But yeah, in the middle of his sentence, he starts feeling a little woozy as he starts saying, "We don't feel so good," as we see the symbiote starting to react weirdly, before he suddenly vanishes in a similar vortex that we saw the Venoms from Edge of Venomverse get sucked into before he disappears from the alley, just leaving everybody wondering what the heck just happened. But like with all those previous Venoms, our Venom does reappear in the alley of an alternate version of New York, and like with those other Venoms, this New York is decrepit, decayed, and clearly lacking of people. As when Venom reappears and gets his bearings back together, he looks around the city, and yeah, there's like debris, rubble, cars flipped on their sides. Everything has clearly been in disrepair, and it's clear that no one's been in this New York for a while. And as a result, Venom, of course, is just wondering what the heck's going on. Why are we here? What's happening? However, as Venom ponders these questions, suddenly he finds that he isn't alone, as standing in the street, as walking up to him is a boy, a child who looks to be not doing so good. His clothes look all tattered and aren't really staying on. He looks skinny. He looks all skinny and he looks like he's literally skin and bones, and he's pale. And I don't mean like he's like lost color in his face. No, I mean he's like literally all pale. His skin, his clothes, everything is just white. And the instant Venom sees him, he immediately just turns off the whole threatening monster act, or he turns off the threatening monster act and tries acting nice, as he even pulls back the symbiote skin and he reveals Eddie Brock underneath. As such, Eddie ends up going up to the kid and, of course, is asking, "Hey, what's going on? Where do you know where everyone is? Come on, let me help you bring you somewhere." As the kid extends his hand, and just as Venom's about to take it, the kid suddenly gets hit in the head with a shield, which ends up throwing him to the ground and killing him. Of course, Venom reacts immediately as he gets the symbiote skin back in place and looks through the shield, and sure enough, it's the Venomized Captain America that we've been seeing in Edge of Venomverse, who immediately tells Venom that if he had touched that kid, then he would have been useless to Cap. Of course, Venom realizes immediately that while this is clearly Captain America, he's not the Captain America he knows. However, as he begins asking questions and wants to know what the heck's going on, Cap lets him know that they need to go right now, because they need to go right now. And so he immediately asks Venom, "Hey, what?" It's like, "Whatever you saw back there, it wasn't what you thought it was. Was it someone you cared about? Someone close? Something that means anything to you?" And Venom responds with, "No one means anything to us." Which Cap says, "Then good, then you're perfect for me," as they run away. But in the last panel, we see the body of the kid that Venom ran into, and we now see he don't look like a kid, but rather a short, very, very skinny creature that almost looks like it's made of bones, with a head that looks like a bony closed flower with like a gaping hole there. And yeah, it's clearly bleeding green blood. So this thing is there's something a little bit off. As such, Venom and Cap end up swinging away because, again, they're both bonded with Venom symbiotes, so of course they can do the thwips. But Venom again is asking more questions as to what the heck's going on. What was that? Why did he kill that kid back there? Since he didn't see what it really was. But Cap is of course just trying to prioritize everything. But Cap is not really paying attention, as he's instead talking about how Venom appeared too far away from the base, how the magic must not be as strong right now, that they're too exposed out here, too easy to track, and they'll need to jackrabbit around a bit so they can throw off any potential pursuers. As such, Venom's like, "Wait, what are you talking about? Magic? Spells? What's going on?" And while Cap assures him that, "Yeah, I know, it's weird, I understand, it's weird, I didn't fully get it either, but you'll get used to it," eventually he manages to lead him to a subway entrance, and they both duck underneath. And so as Venom continues asking questions, Cap pretty much tells him that he'll understand in time, but for now, welcome to the Resistance. And sure enough, we soon see where Cap has been leading Venom. As in what's left of the subway, we find ourselves with a gaggle of venomized superheroes, all of whom from parallel universes. And of course, among this group, we have a venomized Ant-Man, a venomized Black Panther. It's not Ngozi, it's actually it's T'Challa this time, so kind of sucks that we don't get to see her, but whatever. There is... Hold on, I made a list. Oh, yeah. There's the Host Rider. There's the Venomized X-23 from Edge of Venomverse number 1. The Venomized Wolverine from Edge of Venomverse number 4. There's a black suit Spider-Man from a world where he still has the symbiote. We see Venomized Rocket from Venomverse War Stories. There's Venomized Deadpool, or Venompool, from Edge of Venomverse number 5. I'm still going to call him Deadpool, though, so sorry about that. But on top of that, there actually are at least 3 other Venoms that we have seen that have been pre-established prior to Venomverse. And those Venoms are Agent Venom, who is basically Flash Thompson, which, yeah, for a time in the main Marvel Universe, Flash Thompson had the Venom symbiote, and he used it, and basically he used it to become the superhero Agent Venom, working for the military. There is a version of Mary Jane known as Spinneret, the version of Mary Jane from the Old Man Look from the Renew Your Vows universe, who, yeah, she's bonded with her world's version of the symbiote, as for a time in the Renew Your Vows universe, she was tricked into bonding with the symbiote, and so she was pulled into this event while she was still bonded with it. And another character who I actually had no idea who she was until I looked it up later. Okay, this character is a girl by the name of Mania, and she does technically qualify as a Venom, mostly because the symbiote she's bonded with is actually kind of cloned from the original Venom symbiote. While she did appear, she wasn't called Mania at first, as originally as originally Mania was like a government agent who got her symbiote, who was bonded with a clone, was with a symbiote that was cloned from the Venom one. She wound up gaining the official title of Mania during Cullen Bunn's run of Venom when Flash Thompson had the symbiote. As at one point while Flash Thompson was duking it out with the supervillain Jack-o'-lantern, he was targeting one of his students, a girl by the name of Andy. Hold on, let me look up her name. I pulled it up. Oh yeah, her name is Andrea Andy Benton, and Flash wound up sending a bit of the symbiote to protect her. But instead, that bit of the symbiote wound up bonding with her and transformed her into Mania, who I'm assuming that's who we meet here. Whether or not this is the Mania from the main Marvel Universe or a completely other parallel universe, I don't know. But point is, she's here, and she does technically qualify as Venom, mostly in the same way that Spider-Woman qualifies as an alternate Spider-Man, but you get my point. So, yeah, there are a whole gaggle of Venoms here, and Eddie is able to put two and two together and realize that they're all from parallel universes. So he immediately asks, "Well, what's going on here? What's going on here? What's going on here? You thought that if you fight these things, you could bring us all together?" And I was like, and Cap says, "Well, no, it wasn't really my idea," which Venom's a little confused by because it looks like Cap's in charge here. But no, the one, of course, as we saw in Venomverse War Stories #1, the one who is really in charge is the Venomized Doctor Strange, who is wheeled into the group, well, in a wheelchair, clearly very weak as he's still radiating magical energy. Yeah, I'll just gotta give his whole backstory here as we learn the whole thing later. Basically, what's going on is that Doctor Strange, this version of Doctor Strange, he is no stranger to jumping through parallel universes. He has traveled through realms unseen and untold, mystical and magical and monstrous all the same, but he's delved in them all. And in his travels, he wound up coming into contact with his symbiote, which is how he wound up getting all venomized. The only problem with this was that Doctor Strange's symbiote, it was being hunted by something that was going after Venom symbiotes, and so as a result, Doctor Strange, in an attempt to try and defend himself, wound up defend these creatures off, wound up deciding that the best way to fight them was to essentially get strength in numbers, and so that's what led to him starting to form this Venomized army as he began using his mystical powers to start pulling in other Venom hosts from across the multiverse, which is where this whole thing comes in. While Captain America is kind of close in rank to him in terms of, well, if we treat this like an army, Captain America is ultimately the tactician. Doctor Strange is the one pulling the strings, but using the spell to summon all these different Venoms from across the multiverse, it takes a lot out of him. So after he does it, like we saw in Venomverse War Stories, after he does it enough times, he has to take a rest, which is why he's currently in the wheelchair, as he still needs to kind of gather his strength before he can do it again. Of course, Venom wants to know what the hell they're even fighting against because even he wonders what. Even he thinks that maybe bringing a bunch of Venoms together is a bad idea, since he probably knows from experience how volatile being bonded with a symbiote is. And the Venomized heroes do start explaining. But as we saw, like we heard in Venomverse War Stories, the threat that they are facing is a race of beings called the Poisons, and Basically, while they don't ever say outright exactly what the poisons do, they basically hunt venomized. They basically are hunting venoms. Again, I'm going to try and piece this all together as it is told sparsely throughout this entire conversation. But basically, what the poisons want are the symbiotes themselves, and while in their base forms they're almost harmless, like we saw with that base form of those is that little shrimp thing that Cap wound up killing before he encountered Venom. Well, it's when they come into contact with someone who's bonded with a symbiote that things get weird. As they explain, apparently when they come into contact with someone who is bonded with a symbiote, they consume them. And when they consume them, basically what happens is that the symbiote, they're strong, they become stronger, more powerful than they were before, but its identity, its memories, its individuality is stripped away along with that of its host. Hold on one second. Sorry, spam call. But yeah, basically, when a poison consumes a symbiote, it makes it stronger, but strips away the individuality of it and the host. So, and as a result, essentially, the venoms treat these creatures like. Basically, the touch of these creatures is poisonous to anyone with a symbiote, hence why the venoms have been calling them the poisons. Of course, even after hearing all this, there's still some tension between the group and Venom. As for one thing, Venom doesn't really want to be here. Because after all, Venom's a tough guy. Venom's the guy who Venom doesn't want to be. Venom isn't hunted by these things. He's a hunter. He can take him. And well, there are a couple members of the Venom army who don't exactly want him to be here. Specifically, Spider-Man and Spinneret, because well, they have histories with Eddie Brock. While this version of Spider-Man is still bonded with his world symbiote, it's clear that he has at least some history with Eddie Brock and Venom. Because, well, the instant he realizes, hey, that Venom is Eddie Brock, he thinks that, no, this guy shouldn't be here. He's nuts. He's not going to help us. This guy's nuts. He's not going to be beneficial. And likewise, Spinneret agrees as well, because, yeah, kind of getting into some more history with Renew Your Vows. In the Renew Your Vows universe, Venom wound up holding Mary Jane and her and Peter's daughter captive, and that alone ended up pushing Spider-Man over the edge and actually to take that Venom down. So yeah, Mary Jane has reasons for why she wouldn't want Eddie Brock to be part of this team either. Though of course, the rest of the Venoms are still vouching for him to stay, because even if he does decide to leave, they believe that the poisons will come for him eventually, so they think that they need to make a stand here on this world while they can to take them down. Of course, however, in the midst of this speech, as they try to convince Venom, Spidey's spider sense goes off, and it turns out, yeah, Venom and Cap were being followed, and sure enough, immediately after he says that, the ceiling caves right in, and we see exactly what was following them. Well, it looks like the Hulk, but not exactly a Hulk that we know. Basically, while it has the same body structure as the Hulk, its skin is green like the Hulk, even has the tattered purple pants like the Hulk, it even talks like the Hulk. Well, the face looks weird. It's like a bone helmet is over his face. And while you can see and even across his body you can see similar bony structures just kind of jutting out. It's like his entire body is made of this thing. And while inside you can see what looks like black tendrils just kind of slithering out every here now and there. It basically looks like it basically just looks like hold on, let me see if I can even find a picture. I think it'd be easier if I just showed a picture of him. Yeah, this is the creature, and yeah, something is clearly wrong. As it turns out, this is actually another one of the larger poisons, and yeah, based on how everybody talks, this is the end result of what happens when a poison consumes a host. Because as Venom is looking at this, and like, wait, why does that guy look like the Hulk? They immediately say it's best if you don't think of them as their friends anymore. It makes it easier. But yeah, with the Hulk immediately jumping in, the Venoms have to go on the offensive, with Agent Venom immediately pulling out his guns and telling everyone to run like hell before he gets a hole punched through his chest. Immediately, Cap tries to pick up where the good Mr. Thompson left off and tries to fend off this monstrous Hulk. But all this results in is him getting captured. As such, he tells the Venoms that they need to retreat, and so as they're retreating, Mania tells Rocket, who this entire conversation he was making a bomb to try and block their path. And while Rocket's a bit reluctant to do it, well, their survival comes first. So he chucks the bomb right in there, though not before he apologizes to Cap for leaving him behind. And so the bomb blows up, and it starts causing a cave in across the subway tunnel. As such, the various Venomized heroes end up scattering, and in the midst of all this, Spider-Man and Venom end up going off together, and so they manage to leave the subway. And of course, Venom does still want more answers, because he still has no idea what the poisons are. But again, Spidey has to keep reiterating, don't you understand? We're being hunted, we have to run. And while Venom says, well, what about the others? Aren't we going to go back for them? Spidey says, we'll have to meet back up with them later. For now, we just need to book it. And sure enough, when they do get back up to the surface, they're not out of the woods yet, because because when they look around at the buildings, they can see from one of the windows is one of the little poisons that they encountered earlier. So both Venom and Spidey start swinging away as Spidey continues giving exposition on the poisons and how Doctor Strange got pulled into this. However, as they go away, they encounter another large poison. This one now looking like it was modeled after Dr. Octopus, who pretty much just giving Venom and Spidey the whole spiel of, it's like, we're very much interested in getting to know you. We want to know your thoughts, your memories, your dreams. Just don't resist. You'll just, you know that this is the end, so why don't you just give in? Of course, Venom and Spidey don't want to give in, and so while Spidey thinks that they could retreat, Venom is ready to go in guns blazing, and so, well, actually no, maybe Spider-Man doesn't want to retreat. Basically, they both want to go in guns blazing, but in the midst of the battle, this Doc Ock manages to stab Venom through with one of his tentacles, and while Venom doesn't die as the symbiote starts healing up, it does leave him exposed enough for a little poison to get close. And while Venom wants to crush the thing, Spidey warns him not to touch it because, well, since Cap was as they mentioned, if you get consumed, touching those things is dangerous. Don't go near them. So Venom manages to find a way around it as he manages to extend a symbiote tendril to grab a piece of rubble and then use the piece of rubble to cave this thing's head in. However, as Venom does start to finally recover, he starts redirecting his attention back to the battle. But in the midst of the battle, Spider-Man gets hurt and gets knocked aside too. And as he has to take a breather and relax, he tells Venom to just run. He'll take care of Doc Ock. Venom has to go meet up with the others. But Venom's like, you know what? No, screw that. You guys brought me here to deal with this thing. So you know what? I'm gonna fucking deal with it. And so he rushes at Doc Ock and just starts duking it out with him, ripping him apart, taking a bite out of one of his tentacles, and even manages to grab a metal rod and just use it to jump at Doc Ock and then stab him right through the head. So Venom's brand of viciousness is actually beneficial for fighting these things. However, while Venom's doing all that, Spidey has something else going on for him. As while he's healing, he thinks he hears his Aunt May calling him, and sure enough, when he looks up, he sees what looks like Aunt May, but she's pale, much like the little boy that Venom saw earlier, or Daredevil that Gwenpool saw in Edge of Venomverse number 2. But she talks to Peter about how he looks so tired, how she can bring him home, that Uncle Ben is waiting for him. And so she extends a hand to Peter, and as he reaches out to take it, well, let's just say that when Venom finally finishes off Doc Ock and begins gloating to Spider-Man how the poisons can be killed, he turns around, but who he sees isn't Spider-Man anymore. He has the body of Spider-Man, but much like the Hulk and Doc Ock, he is not Spider-Man, as the black suit has now been replaced with a white armor that looks all bony and jutted out and stronger. His face is now more angular. His teardrop eye holes are now look like eyes. His spider's now black. We can see some tendrils out there. And when Venom looks at him, when Venom looks at him, the first words that come out of Spidey's mouth are, "Oh, Spider-Man's gone now. But I'm going to do the one thing that he never had the guts to do. I'm going to kill Venom." And that's where the issue ends. Hold on one second, son. Yeah, apologies for the downgrade in lighting. Again, I'm doing this video in the morning, and the sun is like shining right through my window, so I think it's a little bit distracting. So sorry about that. But anyway, yeah. So thoughts on this first issue? It's all right. It's a good action-packed issue, but it's one of those hit the ground running type of beginnings. As in the terms of exposition, it's very much just quick, just blink and you'll miss it exposition. Basically, in a way, okay, first off, what I do like, I do like the way that Venom reacts to meeting the Venom army, so to speak, because, well, it kind of has a similar flair to it. It has a similar feeling to when you first saw the Spideys coming together in Spider-Verse, because seeing so many Venomized superheroes all in one place, all ready to start kicking ass, it's actually pretty cool, and I especially love Venom's reaction when he does see the other Venomized heroes, because immediately he can tell these are not, like, okay, these are all people from other universes. So I do like that, and yeah, just seeing them all spread out, seeing them all work together, again, while not a lot of them are Venoms that you could be familiar with, as like I said, they're all just essentially they're all basically just superheroes bonded with their world's version of the Venom symbiote. I can't deny that the level of coolness from seeing all of them together, it's cool, it's good, it's nice, it's really nice, and I do like seeing, and I do kind of, and I like the, and basically when they do start trying to work off of each other and start going off experiences, it works. I especially like, for example, we can see some similarities between these versions of the heroes and the ones we know. That's like, for example, despite the Spider-Man on this team being bonded with his world's version of the Venom symbiote, he still has a history with Venom and Eddie Brock, and so the instant he sees that Eddie is the newest recruit, he's immediately like, oh hell no, I don't want him on our team, he's bad news. Bad news, which Spinner at seconds, considering her own history with Venom, and yeah, spoilers, she's not bonded with her Venom symbiote by choice. Basically, so I kind of do like that. So I do kind of like that. There is some minor tension, and you do, and like with Venomverse War Stories, we now learn more about the enemy that the Venom army is facing. Mind you, like, and what makes it better, like, while some of this is still stuff that we kind of got when we read Venomverse War Stories, at the very least, we can now hear it from a direct source, as they have to explain to Venom what they're facing is, and we do learn a little bit more about how it works, as they mention how the poisons, like as they kind of briefly talked about in Venomverse War Stories, consume both the symbiote and the host, and that what this consumption does is that it makes the symbiote stronger, more powerful, but it strips away its individuality and just turns it into a weapon. And we end up seeing how that operates in the story proper, when we see the poisoned versions of the Hulk, Doc Ock, and eventually Spider-Man. Because, as I mentioned when I talked about Venomverse War Stories, it's like they're being assimilated. And the way that they showcase it in the comic is honestly kind of disturbing, because... Hold on one second. Sorry, I was looking up a term. But, yeah, the way... I like how they show... the way we see how these hosts are infected by the poisons and how they've been transformed into these literal monsters, I think it honestly looks... I think it's actually kind of creepy, and I think it's showcased perfectly when we first see the infected characters that have been turned to the poisons, because clearly whatever the little ones do, it literally does look like they're consuming a host, because, well, based on what we see with the examples in this book, well, let's say it like this. We start off with these small little creatures that look like they couldn't hurt a fly, but then all that needs to be done is that they need to touch someone who is bonded with a symbiote, and essentially they grow over the symbiote, over the person, begin using them until they eventually do consume them completely and essentially take over. And we've seen that with what the examples we see here, because yeah, the creatures that we see in the story, it's clear they are not, like what that Spidey said, it's clear they are not the people they once were. They have the bodies, they have the powers, and they even have some traits from who they were initially, but ultimately it's not them anymore. And as a result, it kind of just makes you feel off when you see them. To see these familiar faces, but to see them looking so strange, acting so strange. And the way they're talking, of course, that makes it sound like it's a good thing. They're saying, "Oh, come on, just join us. Become a part of this fold. Let your symbiotes be a part of this," and so on and so forth. It just definitely feels creepy and feels off, and basically just kind of seeing these familiar people, but with these inhuman traits added on top of them, it definitely can make you feel disturbed. It can definitely make you feel disturbed. And what makes it even better is that the base designs for the poisons look honestly fucking creepy. These are, and adding on to the idea of how like I said, they consume a venom host, it's even creepier. Like I said, the first time we see a poison like this, they look just super skinny and bony and shrivelly, and then you got those little heads, and like, to know that something that looks so harmless, it can be dangerous, is honestly even more disturbing, because because they're so small, they can easily just sneak around, go into places, jump you, because again, all you need to do to be consumed is to touch one. And as we saw with Spider-Man at the end of the comic, all it took was for him to hold the hand of one of these things, then suddenly boom, boom, he's now a part of their whatever collective. So it's genuine. So it really kind of gives you the chills when you see them, knowing that you can be consumed and controlled and lose yourself to whatever it is that these things are. I think it's just genuinely fucking disturbing. Made even worse when how they're able to trick you into becoming a part of their fold, because as they also mention, the imagery that we see, that's like, it's a psychic defense mechanism. It's how they're able to lure potential hosts in. And while the Venoms are fully aware that this is how the poisons operate, it's how they pull them in, that doesn't mean they can't fall for it. And we see that in the story. Now, previous two examples that we've seen of this were in Edge of Venomverse number 2 and at the beginning of this comic when Venom first arrived in this universe. Because in Edge of Venomverse number 2, we saw Gwenpool meeting with who she thought was Daredevil. And with the knowledge that this issue gives us, it's clear that the fake Daredevil she was talking to was actually a poison that was trying to lure her in. Which, yeah, spoilers, this universe is the same universe as that one. This universe, right, the universe that we are seeing right here, the world that all these Venoms are being pulled to, it's the world that the Gwenpool from issue 2 of Edge of Venomverse called home. And yeah, basically that when you add the poisons to all this, apparently it leads to death and destruction because the entire universe is decrepit, abandoned, and falling apart. So yeah, that's another reason why that's a good idea to get rid of them while you can. Though you can make an argument that maybe this was a side effect of the fight between the poisons and the Venoms. I don't know. But basically, yeah. But yeah, we saw an example of that with Gwen and Daredevil, and despite the fact that Gwen's symbiote was able to sense that something was off with Daredevil, Gwen fell for it hook, line, and sinker until it was too late. And then likewise, when Venom comes around, he almost fell for the little boy act, even though he looked so inhumanly pale. Basically, it's like, for those ones though, you could make the example of they didn't know what they were getting into, and for all they know, these could have been real people. But keep in mind, Spider-Man knew what the poison's defense mechanism was. He even warned Venom about it, or they even warned Venom about it. But he still fell for it. When he was on the ground, hurt after the poison Doc Ock ended up knocking him aside, he saw what he thought was Aunt May, and while we can tell it's not Aunt May, because she was just as pale and sickly. She was just as pale as the other illusions of the poisons have used. It's clear he falls for it, which makes me believe that the psychic defense that the poisons use to lure Venoms in not only creates a mask to make the person to look like the person that they know, but also affects the mind of the person viewing it, so that they not only see the person doing it, but they're convinced. Like, that's like they were able, like, essentially the poisons are able to reach into their mind, grab this image, and then use that connection to essentially convince them that no, this person's real. They are real. You can trust them. And it's basically just like psychic coercion. Like, they can pull it apart, but through that connection they're able to convince you, no, it really is us. Just come on. Even allowing you to ignore obvious. Even allowing you to essentially ignore anything about these images that look off, like despite the fact they look pale, or despite the fact that Spider-Man knows this is how they lure you in, but he still fell for it. So again, add on that little bit of creepiness that they can get into your head, pull out what you love most, and use that to trick you into being consumed by them. It's honestly just really fucking creepy. So I'll dig that. I dig that. The issue does, I think, a good job at establishing just what kind of a threat that the Venoms are facing here. But in terms of story, it feels like a drive-by. Like I said, when Venom first arrives to join the Venomized army, he's given exposition about how the poisons operate just very quickly. Which, again, you can kind of understand because they established some of this stuff in Venomverse War Stories when they talked about the poisons offhand like that. And so as a result, some of this stuff is stuff that you would know already. But likewise. Sorry, I'm blanking. There's a dog right here, so I'm blanking. But then likewise, the tension that comes with having Eddie Brock join this team, that kind of goes away when everyone has to calm down. When they try and convince him to join the team, it feels too easy. They try to convince him to join the team, and well, Venom doesn't really have an aha moment where he says, "Well, okay, I'll listen to you." But rather, as they try to convince him, that's when the Hulk comes in, and basically that moment just kind of stops as we go right to the action. And from there, the comic just keeps hitting the ground running as the Venoms have to go retreat. Venom and Spider-Man are kind of together as they run away before they run into more poisons who want to do them harm. And before they can calm down from that again, that's when Spidey gets consumed. And despite the fact that Venom killed Doc Ock, they're still now Spider-Man's turned against him. So there's still something that's still kind of a bad thing. Which that's a very big oh shit moment to end the comic on, which I think is a good way of trying to draw you in, as you not only see an example of how the poisons consume a host, but now showcases that one of the people that you were just introduced to can get killed off, which honestly doesn't affect this. Which honestly, if I can say something else, this doesn't really affect me as bad as the casualties in Spider-Verse, because quite frankly, a benefit of having all these characters not be pre-established from other continuities, you can do whatever you want to them. You can care enough about them because they have the faces of people like with Black Panther, Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, and so on. But ultimately, they're not them. They're alternate universe versions of them. They were not in pre-established stories. They didn't have there was nothing that happened to them prior to this. With maybe exceptions from Edge of Venomverse with the characters from the Edge of Venomverse issues, but even they were strictly created for Venomverse, so they still don't have. So there really isn't anything too much that you see. There's nothing really there that you need to be afraid of, that you need to worry about getting attached to. Like you can still care about them because they are still technically the people that just with bonded with with their world's Venom symbiotes. But likewise, there is still But likewise, since they were clearly created for Venomverse, you don't have to really there's nothing really to worry about losing a connection there, as ultimately that's what they're here for. They're here to fight in this battle and potentially die. So, again, it doesn't really affect me as bad to see Spider-Man die, though at the same time, that establishes very well early on that anybody could go, because, well, when it comes to Venom, Spider-Man's one of the seminal hosts. He's the guy that brought the Venom symbiote to Earth. He's the guy that the symbiote has a beef with. He's the guy whose powers that the symbiote copied and utilizes from most of the other hosts. So to see a version of him come in who immediately has his own issues with Venom and who immediately runs off with Venom suddenly get consumed, I think that helps showcase rather early on that anybody could go at any time. So I like that. So I do like that at the very least. But otherwise, though, the comic again feels like a drive. Like it feels like a drive-by. Like it's here to help quickly establish what the hell is going on with this storyline. Of course, we have to kick things off by bringing Venom into the fold as he's brought to this universe by Doctor Strange to join the army. He immediately gets introduced to the Venoms and wants to know why they're brought together, and he's told about the poisons. Though again, he's only given like bits and pieces of the full story. And then likewise, before he can actually say, I want to join this team, that's when the poisons attack, and the comic hits the ground running from there. So it feels like that we didn't really have too much of a quiet moment in order to get our bearings in the story. Again, not too bad. Again, it's not too bad because it still has some really cool stuff in there. Like, again, I liked seeing the Venom joining up with the Venom army because, again, it is still cool to see all these Venomized heroes in one room together, so I dig that. The design of the poisons genuinely look threatening and creepy, though if I'm being honest, the more upgraded poisons we see, the more generic they kind of get. But the base design of the poisons, I think, is just kind of disturbing, and the whole idea behind them, I think, is just all around creepy in its own right. On the whole, the first issue, I think, is fine. Not too great, not awful, but ultimately it sets up the situation well enough so you can get a handle on it. And ultimately the rush nature, I think, is ultimately, I think the rush nature, while slightly a hindrance, does at least keep the ground running as you're given enough answers to get a basic grasp of the situation, but not enough to fully understand what's going on. So combine that with the cliffhanger ending with seeing Spider-Man get consumed, which again showcases how the poisons operate when they manage to when the base ones make contact with a host, and suddenly right away. something you're like, okay, what the hell's going on? I want to know. So I think it's a good way of at least getting people into the story without giving them too much right off the bat. So on the whole, first issue is fine. Feels a little rushed in some places, but overall it's entertaining and fine, and helps set up the threat without giving away too much information. So yeah, I think that's about it. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you on Tuesday as we look at issue 2. So till then, hope you have a good Saturday, and as always, take care.